Welcome to My Time to Shine. I'm your host, Emily.
Hi, and welcome back to the podcast. Today we have a very inspirational guest with us today, defying age, a jack of all trades. We have Mr. Michael Mason with us. So welcome to the podcast.
Hello, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. I know you're a very busy guy, so thank you very much for blessing my audience today with your lovely stories. If you would like to start by just telling us a little bit about yourself and your background for my listeners who maybe don't know who you are.
Um, yeah, I always have sort of like trouble with this because I've never really been like a defined sort of like person. I've never had like a defined sort of like job. I've never, so where can I start? Okay, I'm 61. I live in the UK. I used to live in Switzerland for about 15 years. I have a beef jerky business. I run carnivore retreats. I was a former ski instructor and bodyguard while I was living in Switzerland. And, like you say, I am a bit of a jack of all trades. I've just done lots of different stuff from antiques to having a mobile phone business to having a web design business. I study martial arts. I've been doing that since I was a kid. I've studied in Japan. I have now 2 Czechoslovakian wolf dogs. One's 10, one's 5 months old. And trying to find time is trying to just find time for sort of. I don't have time. I just sort of like it's. My life has always been like that. So. I like eating. I follow a carnivore, let's call it a carnivore-ish diet, heavy meat-based diet, low carb, which I've done for a long, long time. I'm very sort of passionate about eating right, looking at ingredients that's on the pack, so I'm not eating any crap. I meditate, I do breath work, I train. All those things pretty much, every day. And I take the dogs for walks.
And your dogs they're like proper wolves. They're not just, your average lap dog that I have. It's like a proper dog. You've got to walk those dogs.
Yeah, so I've had Wolf 9 and 3/4 years. In the beginning I had him and thought, well, I'm never going to get another one of these. And and I could have taken, even like today after having Noodle for the last 5 days, I'm thinking, have I done the right thing? Should I have just got an easy dog to give, to make my life just a little bit, simpler? But that's not the way that I do. I like the idea of perhaps sort of like just make things a little bit simpler, but that's just not. I like to do simple, simple breath work, simple training, simple eating, simple mindset sort of stuff. When it comes to dogs, that's all just goes out the window. So yeah, no.
You have good control over every part of your life, apart from the dogs.
Well, I think that's more of perhaps an impression that I give. But yeah, it's like I try to wrap up that chaos,
Mm.
and I suppose that's probably like a good way of of putting it. I try not to let the chaos come out of the bag. So I try to put a lid on it. Lots of different bubbles of chaos in my life, and I suppose ultimately that's what mindfulness, having a good mindset is about. It's not necessarily about not having chaos. It's about trying, and I say trying, to manage the chaos. Yeah.
Do you think you're quite an all or nothing kind of person then?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm not sort of like middle of the road. I mean, I'm not, I've always, I always felt, as a square peg in a round hole, as not necessarily in a bad way, but I always felt, a little bit sort of different. And I don't mean that in any sort of like weird or any sort of like negative connotation to that. But I've never been one to, take like, let's say the middle path, or it's always been all or nothing. I suppose it's the same, same with the dogs. It's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
I've just never been, yeah, trying to answer that, and to really just understand myself within that is quite difficult. But with that, I try not to put labels on myself. And when someone puts a label, it's like, I try to be labelless. I try to be able to sort of like go from one bubble to another, and be able to sort of like mix. So when people say I'm a carnivore, so well, yeah, I eat a lot of meat, or I eat more meat than I do everything else. And I hate being, I say hate, I don't like being sort of like labelled. And even in a minority, I will be a minority within, within that. And I suppose really that's my personality. And I suppose, in a sense, it's like, I've got wolf dogs, and to a degree that's their sort of like personality. They're pack animals. I like being with that, but I don't like being defined, perhaps because I can't define myself or try to define myself, and perhaps there's no need to define oneself. That was a big of an answer, wasn't it? But yeah,
I agree with that though. I think it's important in life to be adaptable, because change does happen. Like change comes along, shit happens.
yeah,
And I think you can either roll with that and adapt and go with the flow, or you can resist it. And it's really tricky and hard if you're fighting against change and being so stuck and set in your ways. Because I myself have had not a similar journey, but in terms of diet, I've also been vegetarian, vegan, and carnivore. And now I'm like, okay, I'm not going to label it. I'm just going to eat meat based. And then if I have a bit of chocolate, who fucking cares? Like, it's being adaptable to the situations that present themselves in life, and not being so rigid and so strict. Because I think, mentioning the carnivore community and the vegan community, it's like, they eat something else and then they freak out because,
yeah,
oh no, I ate something else.
yeah. I mean, and then people find it hard then to, oh, I've fallen off the wagon.
Yeah.
And then they can't get you. They can't get you. And I understand, some people need to be sort of strict and rigid, but you can't. It's very, very difficult to do that long term.
Mm.
And this is not about, let's take that for an example. It's not about doing this for 2 weeks, or being
Mm-hmm.
carnivore for 2 weeks. Okay, well, great, fantastic. Tell me that in 12 years that you've have done the last 12 years every single day,
Mm-hmm.
just beef and salt and water.
Yeah.
There's going to be, don't think there's anyone. I mean, that's I mean, it's, and so then people try to follow that, and they can't, and they don't know how to sort of like adapt. And the messaging and the narrative coming through is like, yeah, you've got to be really strict with this, and people, people fall off the wagon. And I like to enjoy experiences. I like to, I know certain things are going to make me feel not as good, let's say the day after, but then what I would do is I would just make that tactical decision, that strategy, and just say, well, actually, I'm going to do that. I know I'm not going to feel, but the experience is great. I was in San Sebastian for 3 days. Last week we had we had a Masons meets team meeting. So I took everyone who's like, well, we went out there, and
Wow.
you know, there's just it's a food lover's dream there. I mean, it's just amazing. And I'm not going to, I've got friends who are, Michelin star chef, and they invite me. It's like, I'm not going to say, well, yeah, I can only eat beef and salt. I wouldn't get invited. I wouldn't even have those friends. So it's like, so I do things, when I choose to do it, and I take, the consequences. And ultimately, we're talking about, 10%, if that, over a period of time. So, I suppose really and again, I don't even like low carb, but I suppose that's what it's just labels. I
Yeah.
do what I do. I try to sing the praises of what I do because of the benefits from it. But I'm not going to be an arsehole and just say, yeah, well, you've got to do this and you've got to do that. If you're coming from being really, really sick and you're doing it under medical, so I'm not a doctor, I'm not a PhD. I'm not going to tell anyone
Mm.
what to do. All I do is what I do, and I feel great. I feel strong. Um, and I do, yeah, that's it.
I want to go back to what you said about having all these different businesses, because online, you have quite a large following on social media, and you're very successful in what you do now. But it started off as you said you had a phone business and all these different things. Tell me a bit about your business sort of journey.
I suppose really, I suppose I suppose in a way, this can end up being like a very, very deep question, and I try to sort of like answer it like perhaps not so deeply. I've always had ideas. I've always had visions. I've always had an idea and think, and my mind then expands, and I just see this vision of then how it could be. And a lot of everything that I've done never worked. Let's call it,
Wow.
it failed. And, for a long time I was going around, in circles of like the same things kept on happening. I just almost just get there. And then, as I perceived it at the time, the rug was pulled from me as if it was an outside circumstance that was the problem and not me. And, I was, 20 odd, 20 odd years ago, I was, um, I suppose at that time I was fairly successful. I was almost like ready to sort of retire. I had sort of, and then, everything was just like the rug was pulled, and, it was like, here we go again. And, so my mindset, the way that I try to look at stuff, you know, and it's an ongoing process, is that, well, Mike, you're either a victim to that and it's everyone else's fault, or, as with everything, cause and effect, you know, maybe, and it's hard to admit, maybe you're the cause of that, or you're partly, or the majority, you're partly the cause. It's all very well having dreams, it's all very well having visions, and seeing things, seeing the finished article, in your mind's eye. But ultimately, if you don't believe it, and you sort of like start putting up barriers, whatever but yeah, it's okay, it's a dream, or you start listening to people, yeah, Mike, forget those dreams and everything, it's all a load of bollocks, it's never going to happen, and that will go wrong. And then all of a sudden, then you're saying, yeah, okay. And this is that sort of strength of your own volition, that your the strength of the will, but you don't know that at the time. And then when I started to look at things, it's like, um the key thing, or the thing that was went through, was me. I mean, it was okay. And then over time, I started to, it's an ongoing, changing things. So where I am in charge, you know, it gets banded about, like, oh, it's better be a creator than be a victim. But that, that's it.
Mm.
I'm the one who has to take control. I'm the one who, if a mistake has happened, it's, well, ultimately, it's sort of like down to me. If let's say it's something else, it's like I then have to sort of like adapt and look at problems not as um, look at what could be conceived as a problem, not as a problem or as a negative. Look at it as, well, actually, this can actually be a solution. Um, and that's the change. That's the changing of mindset. Some people have this naturally.
Mm.
Some people, like me, takes years and years and years and years and years. And bearing in mind, prior to this, I was studying martial arts. I was studying, meditation, in my 20s, or up until 22, I had a drug problem. And so when people look on my logo, the Mason Survival logo, it says since 1986. And that was
Mm.
the time that I made a decision to sort of like, okay, stop that. This is the new. And so that's sort of working on yourself, being drug and alcohol free, and then starting to look at meditation, breath work, better ways of thinking. That was like the basis, but it needed more than that. It needed me to make that change of like, I'm the one who's in charge. I'm not here to blame other people, and it's your fault, it's their fault, it's the government's fault, it's their, and just keep a clear vision in my mind of where I want it to be, and not let anything distract me. And that's the challenge that we all have in life, because there's always going to be distractions.
Yeah. I actually want to read you a quote that I took from your Instagram, which you literally just mentioned. So I think this is a very great time to just read out to you. And like, let's go back there to that time and really, share with our listeners, my listeners, who you were back then. Because I think a lot of people are in that position now and can so relate to you, because you come across as a really successful, mentally tough guy, whereas, it hasn't always been that way. So this is the post that I like screenshotted. And you put, I had just been in a fight. That's blood on my nose, and your nose is smashed. There's a few pictures on your Instagram. My cousin and his friends were laughing because that fight with a bunch of fairground workers, I was the only one left standing. They all had run off. And then you put, my cousin later said, you train like Bruce Lee. We expected you to fight like him. And you were like, I did ish. And then further down, you've got, on this day, the 23rd of August, 1986, I made the decision to give up all drugs. And it says here that, you went to inside the doors of hell and back again. So let's go there and like, tell me who you were then. And it's just such a big transformation to who you are now. And I don't think people, you can't even comprehend that person because he doesn't exist anymore.
But the funny thing, so one, there's a funny story with a broken nose, because I went to hospital, and for years after, my dad kept on getting an invoice from the hospital to to pay for like the treatment that I had, which he never paid. And and the other thing is that people see me now, and they've like, this has been sort of like, 40 years, let's say it's 40 years. And people think it's like now, oh, yeah, Mike, you're so, you're Mr., you're clean, you don't drink, you don't smoke, you train, you eat healthily and blah, blah, blah. And I just, and sometimes it's like, if only they knew. It was like, and so again, that experience that I had is all part of that foundation that makes me who I am today. Not just what happened in 1986, but everything, up until then. And why did that happen? It's, there's always going to be an answer to, oh, it happened because of this, and it happened because of this, it happened because you didn't have the strength of will, and it happened because of like, there's loads of things that I can put, in there. Mike, have you got something that can help my son or my daughter not go down that path? And honestly, I don't have an answer. If I had an answer, I'd be a multi-billionaire, because it's you know, this is you know, and then you get into that thing. It's like, you know, do I blame anyone for that? And it's like, well, no, because I don't blame, you know. And listen, for years I blame my parents for everything. You know, I needed someone to blame, blah blah blah, and then you come up, doesn't really matter. You know, I'm very much or try to be like living the now. You know, the past, the past doesn't exist. It's just now. It's just a memory. It's a program here. And the same with, you know, the same with the future. The only thing that has any sort of substance is the now. And, you know, and so I don't have any sort of you know, answers. I can't really say why it happened. You know, I have some ideas, but it's just to say, you know, I got involved in stuff, and in the beginning it seemed like fun, and you know, it was like, oh, this is cool, and it just seemed to be okay. It was like, you know, this is like this is what people do, you know. And luckily for me, very very quickly, you know, I fell off the cliff very very quickly. You know, um a lot of people, it doesn't happen. They reach a rock bottom very, very quickly. It happens over a period of years.
Right.
And, you know, it's a, it's a little bit sort of like gruesome, but, you know, I've got loads of stories, but it's a good sort of story. It's a good, sort of like reminder. So I had a mate back then, um, I his name name was Crunchy, and, you know, we were all doing the sa like, the, you know, the same. I think he's dead now anyway. Quite sure he's dead. And, you know, in 1986, you know, I stopped, and when I used to come, you know, every now and then I'd be back in the center of town, and I remember seeing him, you know, probably like a couple of years after, you know, he was in a wheelchair. And, he's lost like the use of his legs, and it's like, hello Mick, and blah blah blah. You know, I had a little chat. That was it. You know, by then I'd lost any obsession or compulsion to use, anything. So none of those things were fearful for me. And then I remember seeing him it may have been 2 or 3 years later, or however long it was. Saw him again in the wheelchair, but he only had one leg.
Bloody hell.
And then, you know, this is because, like, from injecting, you know, the veins die, and then leg gets amputated. And then another, whenever it was, 2, 3, however many years, I saw him again. You know, he's begging. He had no legs. And so you sort of like, you see that, and it's like, you know, I didn't have to go through, that, so I was, whatever you want to call it, I was, I don't believe in luck, but whatever you want to call it, my rock bottom happened very, very quickly, and I was able to then make a decision that was really, really hard. It was really, for me, really tough,
Yeah.
to sort of like change direction. So, my life sort of like now, and like, since then, is that I can make very, very hard sort of like decisions, and sort of like, you know, I, I've burnt lots of bridges. You know, it's like, I'm actually sort of like very, very, I'm actually sort of like very good at that. That can be a good thing, and it can also be a bad thing. Once I've made it, and this gets back to what you say, I'm not in the middle, but sort of like, it's like all or nothing. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of people can relate because everyone's rock bottom is, it is very different. But to be able to get to that point so quickly, it was, it was fortunate that that's what happened, and to reflect upon seeing your friend and how, he's losing his legs. And that must have been a big, like, whoa, I made the right decision here for you, and sort of confirmed it in your mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's a picture that's sort of like, that's there, and it's a
Mm.
story that that I tell people, and it sounds sort of like unbelievable, because it's only believable if you're there in terms of, let's say, the emotional content for of it, and how, because it was completely relatable. I was connected to it,
Mm.
so it's and the we all had nicknames then. It was like, it's like, you know, the last guy that a friend of mine who I used drugs with, his nickname was Ratso. You know, I stopped, and a year later I was at his funeral. So it's it's there's always these sort of like reminders sort of like, then we all think we're Superman. However much in the whole, we all think that we have control. We all think, yeah, I can get out of this if I want to, but tomorrow I'll
Mm.
do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not that ready. I'm not that ready to give up. And you just, and I think people sort of look at certain people and they think, like, well, can't you see the shit you're in? I mean, you just see why don't you just want to, like, stop? Because they're not ready. And everyone has to get to that point where they're sick and tired of being sick and tired, however dreadful that is. And I suppose the wisdom, perhaps from that is, with all decisions that we make with everything, is not allowing yourself to get sick and tired before you make a decision. It's sort of like, seeing things, how they're going to pan out, and then making a decision before it gets to, whatever that is, in anything. So yeah.
What was that point for you?
What was that point? Well, I think, people think, oh, you must have been sort of like very, you must have been very, very strong, and 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 what have you, to make that decision. Well, you know, I can quite easily say, yeah, I was, because I was so strong and what have you. I wasn't, but I knew what I was doing wasn't for me. It was all of a sudden, it's like, fuck, how did I get here? There was, what was the song? Oh, I can't think, but there was a line. It came around the same sort of, like, it came, Talking Heads. I think it was talking like once in a lifetime. And
Yeah.
there's one of the lines, like, and all of a sudden, how did I get here? And it was like, that was like, how the fuck have I got? It's like, this wasn't in my plan.
Mm.
When I was a kid, I remember being at school, and they said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And it was like, "I want to have my own airline."
Wow.
Which is just like a, like a thing, like, what a funny thing to sort of, what odd, so, but I want to have my own, I want to have my, call it Mason Air or something like that.
Yeah.
But, and then all of a sudden, I'm in, I'm in, being locked up. I'm in rehab, and it's like, how did I get here?
Mm.
And I knew that, yeah, this isn't for me. It's not it's not for me to carry on this way. So there
And
was,
was it a
so
quick change?
yeah, I mean, so I went out. So 86, I was in a rehab, came out sort of clean, and then I suppose, really, I still hadn't had enough. even though, and it's all like, you know, and this was like Ratso. This was this was like the last guy that I, you know, that I sort of like, use with. And it was like, then it was like, yeah, this is not. Yeah. So with all the knowledge, with all the cleverness, with all the, you know, that compulsion and obsession to sort of, to use whatever it is, you know, until that has gone, you know, you can't overpower it with cleverness, with knowledge, with, you know, with what, you know, at some point it's got to, like, you've got to make a, yeah, that's it, done. And even once you make that decision, for me anyway, it wasn't like it's easy, but it's like anything. It's like, you know, you do a diet or you do a fast. First few it's hard. That's when people like cave in or can't, you know, cope. But the more you do it, the more hours that you have, the stronger, and then all of a sudden, after 2 days or whatever it is, whether it's a new diet, whether it's a fasting, whether it's going to the gym, whatever it is, whether it's studying something, whether it's reading a book, and you're not used to reading a book, after a period of time of actually sort of creating that consistency, all of a sudden it's like you then create your own power. And that's why I talk, you know, a lot with, let's say, the Mason survival. It's about consistency. It's not about doing that for one fucking day, you know. And it's like, you know, some people don't want to, you want to hear that. It's about creating that consistency. So it's like day in, day out, you're following. After a week, it feels better. After 2 weeks, after 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden, this, you know, you've created more sort of pathways and etc., and then you have power. You know, then you have the power to make those choices. So yeah, so that's what, you know, that's what I tend to sort of like talk about, or sort of like evolve in, the Mason survival. You know,
And
that
what is that
whole.
for all our listeners who don't know what Mason survival is?
Do you know something? I don't know what it is. I mean, you know, it's, again, I can't sort of like, I can't define it, because it's, like myself, I can't really define me. It's everything that's made me who I am, good or
Mhm.
bad, what I am now, in, you know, into that, you know, the decisions I make about food. Why do I breathe? Why do I meditate? Why do I do certain practices? You know, because, you know, over this last, let's say, 40 years, I've done a whole load of stuff. And it's like, you know, after these years, I've worked out that works, that doesn't work. That's a bit, you know, I love woo woo. That's a bit sort of like this woo woo, but there's no substance. Because lots of woo woo has substance, but people focus on, you know, on the woo woo because it sounds, you know, it sounds nice, and it's like, yeah, it sounds nice, but, you know, a lot of people won't believe that. Just give them the facts, give them the science. You know,
Mm.
why do we do that? Why do we breathe like that? Not because it sounds nice, or you know, you're sitting on in a special. It works because there's science. You know, there's actual science behind it. So Mason survival is about that wisdom that I've picked up of, you know, learning stuff in a very, very hard, you know, with martial arts, in a very, very severe environment mentally, um, and then come almost like, you know, let's say, coming out like the other side, and then you come out the other side and say, actually, you can disregard 98% of that because it's all bollocks.
Wow.
But you only know that after, you know, and, you know, it's there's sort of like, sometimes there aren't any sort of shortcuts, but sometimes I like to give people that bit of shortcut. Maybe, you know, whether they're ready for it. Not everyone's ready for shortcuts, but
Mhm.
everyone gets focused on like the shortcut. You know, like, oh, I'm going away for, yeah, a weekend. I'm going to learn this and everything, and that's it. But yeah,
Where did you do your martial arts?
Well, I mean, I did them in the UK, but I used to go to Japan and study there with my teacher. And, and it was, it was, I suppose really it's like a boy, for me, it's like it's like a boyhood, hood dream. I've done
Yeah.
martial arts since I was 9 years old. And, you know, when I grew up in the 70s, there was no internet, there was no video games, there's none of the stuff that we have today. There was, you get someone would hear about a book, there'd be a television program. I remember the television programs at the time. There was Bruce Lee, and in 1973 he made Enter the Dragon. I remember reading the book, at school, and I was just, and also in that 73, the program with David Carradine, Kung Fu, that came out once a week, and it's like, I just saw that. It's like that. Yeah, that's what I want to do. Because it was
And
just,
what style was it? Is it jiu-jitsu, kung fu, or like a mixed kind of?
So I started off doing Shotokan karate, because that was the
Wow.
only place then that there was either karate or judo. There
Okay.
wasn't like what we had, like we have now. I mean, it's like a multitude of a whole spectrum of everything, and everyone's a grandmaster, and everyone is and most of that, 98% of that is all baloney. In my in it just, yeah. I mean, it's like I try not to be sort of divisive, but some things. And I tell you what was funny. I think it was a couple of years ago. So I was in Brighton, the city centre, and I was in I was parked the car under one of the malls, walked up, and I'm looking at this old fella, and I'm looking, I said, "Oh, well, I know him," and he was my first teacher back from like 1973. So he was a guy called Ron Silverthorne, and I've gone up to him and I said, "You're not going to you won't recognise me, but I recognise you." I said, "Are you Sensei Ron Silverthorne?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I started coming to you in 1973 at the King Alfred."
Wow.
And he shook hand and gave me a hug. He had a grip like hell. He was 90 years old. He's still teaching.
Wow.
And and I got and I posted I posted a picture. I think it was the beginning of, like, in January. I think it was a couple of years ago, and it made my, it's like things like that, made my year. It was just like a powerful sort of like experience. Like, I know you,
Yeah.
but yeah.
What belt did you get to?
So currently I'm a fifth dan in Nimpo Taijutsu. I have my mastership title in that, and I've
Wow.
studied Aikido, Qigong. I teach Qigong, like the breath work within that. I was one of the first people in the UK to be a Krav Maga instructor before anyone knew what Krav Maga. And I've got my own old license, so which is nice. So I've got like a bit of got a little bit more hair. The face is a little bit more, but yeah.
And for our listeners, Krav Maga is, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's like a form of self-defense and including like street fighting as well, like how to take a gun off people. Is that right? And things like
Yeah, I
that?
mean, it's a, let's call it a military style. So
Mm,
everything is focused on that moment when it's sort of like where it's off, and how
yeah.
ultimately you recover from that being in a bad position, because that's what survival is. It's about how well you recover from, like, being in a really bad position. Whatever that is. And getting yourself out of the shit, whether that's mentally, whether that's physically, whether that's in an altercation, whether that's financially, whether that's your cake has gone wrong, You know, you're whisking up something, and all of a sudden it's split, and it's like, oh fuck, blah blah blah. And it's like, how do you recover? How do you recover? And chefs recover from that. It's like, okay, don't worry about that. Put a bit of hot water, and all of a sudden it comes back, and
Yeah.
it's just having those sort of like those bits of chunks of knowledge that you can get yourself out of the without throwing the baby out the pram, and it's like giving up and then lying down. And again, what you asked before about what is Mason survival. It's about that. It's about having those little tools that can get you out of the crap, because you don't know when it's going to happen. It's yeah. So,
And it does happen.
but
Shit
it had,
happens all the
yeah.
time.
Well, okay, so that's it. So that's that's also an interesting point, because I do believe sort of like things can go wrong, but to make the assumption, it's not when we say, yeah, life is bad, or things are, life's tough and blah blah blah. When people make sort of assumptions, I sort of think, well, maybe what happens if it isn't? Because if you're then going through life when you're saying, yeah, if you go, yeah, shit's going to happen and blah blah blah, then you're sort of like pre-programming yourself for stuff to happen. And maybe your mindset should be about not having that attachment to whether shit happens or so whether good happens or anything, and just being free of that. But also, and this is where it's almost sort of contradictory, because I do go off on tangents, but I will get to sort of like the point. But it's good to have skills. I'm very much a believer in the observer effect. So within quantum physics, if you give something attention, it's there. If you don't give it attention, it's not there. And that's quantum physics. That's a proven thing. If anyone doesn't understand what I'm talking about, then just search like the double slit experiment. So what you focus on, is faces you, and again, the Japanese culture is based on Shintoism, and in our dojos we would have a kamidana, let's call it a table shrine, the shrine that sits on a shelf. You open the door, and all that's in there is a mirror. That's all there is, and for a long time I sort of understood what that meant. I say I sort of understood, but it never really sort of like hit home. And it's like, that is, life reflects who I am. Life reflects back to me, who I am, what I think, what I see. That's what then comes back to me, and that's been my experience. And once I started to understand that, and then start to apply that with let's call it like the observer effect. If I listen to the news, two people, one could just like watch Only Fools and Horses, 40 Towers, and what have, and the other person would just be watching the news. I know who's going to be more stable and more positive, and let's call it a better person to be around with. Same people. Let's say they're twins. What we look at, and we program ourselves. And what this is a computer. So what we listen to, what we say to ourselves, our own sort of self-talk, what we listen to, what we choose to look at, is a program, and that is the challenge for me, the challenge of life, the challenge of trying to get yourself out of negative ways of thinking.
And that's hard to do. I
Oh yeah,
know so
yeah,
many, people directly around me, my own family included, are very set on the news and, the fear mongering of it. And it's very easy to get swept up into that. The recent thing that happened, within the last couple of years was COVID and the
yeah,
lockdowns. Oh, that was so scary, without going into too much detail about that whole situation, but how easy that fear kind of spread amongst everyone, and people are still sort of suffering from that now.
yeah.
How would you say, from your own experience, to not get swept up into that and, the people who are around you?
Look, most people, let's say most people are on social media. Social media in itself isn't sort of necessarily a bad thing. It can be a bad thing. It can be a good thing. It can be depending on how you're sort of like how you're looking at it. But everyone will know if they click on something or they look at something, all of a sudden they're then fed the same type of info. So if you look on for, let's say, I want to buy a new microphone. Look at one, and then all of a sudden you're getting ads for all other types of microphones.
Yeah.
If on Instagram, if you click on or you look at a post, you'll get more of that content coming through.
Yeah.
So you will then sort of like getting sort of like programmed with. If you're looking at news, you'll get more news. If you look at sort of like nice, pleasant. If you look at cooking stuff, you'll how was your day today? Oh, brilliant. I've just seen a new recipe. I'm going to cook these short ribs. It was a Gordon Ramsay rib. It looks absolutely fabulous. I love eating a block. How was your day? Did you see the news? And it's like,
Yeah.
it's the world is sort of like, that's it. That's the mirror.
Mm.
What I put into that then comes back to me. So, and that's a really, really hard thing to sort of like start to control, because it's challenging. But I need to know. I need to know what's going on. It's just very, very difficult. But I need to know. And you think, well, do you or don't you? And then this becomes like a really difficult conversation. Yeah, but Mike, you need to know what's going on there. Blah blah blah. You need to be, surrounded by, all the fear and what have you. And I think, well, do I? Is my life about what's over there, or it's here? How I feel here. How I feel. You know, And so, yeah, but it's not about just eating well. And I think, well, actually, yeah, it is. It's about eating well. It's about spending time doing some meditation. It's about spending time, doing good breath work. It's about, taking the dogs out for walk, being out and they doing a bit of training, and maybe passing on a little bit of knowledge to people that you meet, communication, people that you meet in the street, walking the dog, having a coffee, whatever it is, when someone lets you go, parking, or you just smile at them rather than, and again with that, with driving, when someone cuts you up, instead of sort of like wanting to chase after them, saying, you fucking wank, blah, 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 letting it go. Because if you do that, 2 minutes later, you've forgotten about them. As
Mm.
soon as you observe them, and you see their face as they're driving past, you've got that imprinted, and you think, wanker. But okay, I say you. It's like, okay, me. I'm still thinking about that person, sort of like 3 hours later. So so I suppose if that's how I live my life, that's how I try to live my life, and try not to um, just try to live my life as well as I can.
I want to share with everyone. I've got a bag of your Mason's meats here, the grass-fed rib cap with your new branding. I just wanted to share that is your new thing now. How long have you been doing this for?
Mason's Meats, yeah. So we started, we launched in April 24, and we sort of started or formulated pretty much about 8 months beforehand, what we were going to do. I was, I've been making jerky, and and people were asking me, well, Mike, when are you going to start selling it? And it was one of those things. It was like, it's like what you said before about all or nothing. Well, yeah, I could have like made some and started selling it at a Sunday or a Saturday market or something like that. But my vision was like, well, if I'm going to do this, because one, it wasn't. I knew that it's not something we can just start. We've got to make a fairly big investment financially, and time. And it's weighing out, do I have the time to do this, and etc., because if I'm going to do this, I want to do this, and I want this to go, to go for gold. I don't want to be selling this on doing a Saturday market here, a Thursday one there, and things like that. And there's nothing against that, but that's, I don't have the time for that. So anyway, someone contacted me, and how things end up sort of like, aligning, and said like, Mike, have you thought about doing this commercially? I said, yeah, I have. I've gone into it in a little way. And so anyway, so Jordan, who's now sort of like my business model, we had a meeting. He came down, we had a meeting, we discussed it. We discussed, let's say, the vision of it, and the vision has always been, two simple ingredients: beef and salt. The best beef that we can get, really good salt, and nothing else. So no nitrates, no other seasonings, no other preservatives. Well, obviously salt is a preservative. And try to make the best beef snack available. And so we then started. Then I spent the next few months going to farms, getting, finding suppliers. Remember then it's, who am I? People say, yeah, how much are you buying? I said, well, we haven't even started yet. And like the phone was being put down, and and also like working, what's the vision? Okay, we're going to do, we're going to end up doing, quite a lot. So I knew that I couldn't just rely on, Mrs. Smith, who's got the farm next door and everything, and she's got, well, I can sell you 10 kilos, once, once, because Britain is full of small farms, and that's pretty much what it, what it's like. So I had very, very big ambition, with this, but we obviously had to test it. We had to sort of test the concept, and so it was 6 months of doing all the testing to make sure to get the thickness right, the amount of salt, everything. And again, that's still like a working sort of like progress, because all the things that I thought I understood, I didn't really understand. I didn't understand that. Understood a bit, but when you do something commercially, it's a whole different. Animals change throughout the season. If in the winter, it tastes different than they're in the summer, that they've just come off the pasture. Some live on pasture all year round. Some are put in a shelter, depending on where they're living. They're being fed on different types of supplementation, depending on where they're, and all these things change flavor, and they change texture. And we're not making a product that's a square piece and it's from, and it's exactly the same, every batch. And this is the start of me driving myself mad over the last sort of like two, like really sort of like, it's like, but it doesn't taste the same as it did last week. And it's like, and it's like, oh, but these are belted Galloway. It's like they're a little bit different from the Angus. And so for the last 2 years, I mean, my head has just sort of, and all these things, and I thought it was going to be my naivety sort of thought, well, yeah, it'll be sort of like fairly sort of straightforward to do. I can tell you it's not. Yeah. I think, and that's because, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I want it to be perfect. And if it's not perfect, we have lots of fantastic feedback all the time. We can have 1,000 people saying it's fantastic. One person says, I didn't like it for whatever reason. And it's like, I'm focusing on that one. And that's like, it's like, that gets sort of like, they stab me in the heart. I think it's a good thing. It's a good way to be, but it's one has to manage that, that sort of like, okay, one person didn't like it, but yeah. So my head has been truly, smashed with it all.
Wow.
But in a good way.
And I keep seeing online that you've sold out. That's a great place to be in.
Yeah, I mean, but even that's like a double-edged, sword,
Yeah.
because it's then you get the complaints, oh, been coming, but you're out of stock, and it's like, we had, I think there was one, I think it was last week that someone had complained that we didn't have any stock, and because we didn't have any stock, they were going to do a review on Trustpilot or something, and it's like, so we've got no stock. I mean, so what it's we sell out. There's only a certain amount. We're moving to a new unit so we can increase production and what have you. But to me, it's like, well, great, we sold out. Yeah, but it's very sort of like interesting because people want it now. They've seen it and they want it now, and they sort of say it's being out of stock is a negative. And if you're out of stock for weeks and weeks and weeks, then that's a negative. But yeah,
it's a growing business, isn't it? And it's still, you said 2 years old.
Yeah, I mean, well, we launched actual selling April 24.
Wow. So,
Yeah.
only a year of official business, really. That's incredible how quick you've grown. And I see that you're doing a subscription service now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
My whole family love it. Like we all, I've got 2 boys and they love the meat sticks. My husband's obsessed with the sirloin. My dog and my cat, like you see their eyes when we open a pack. They're following us around the house.
dogs are going at dogs and kids. 99% going mad for this stuff. It's getting emails from saying, like, I've got to lock it up because the kids will take it. And even like babies, you see, people are sending images of their babies eating it. And dogs just going mad because it's why? Because there's nothing to mask it. It's just simple. It's just beef and salt. So yeah.
Yeah, it's delicious, by the way, for all our listeners. Make sure you get some, guys. I'm going to link it in the description box below, but the best.
And because we've just rebranded, so the old logo was an M with an image of wolf. Okay, so if you pick up the packet again, so when we did the rebranding, wolf is still there because
I love it.
there's the ears at the chin. There's the ears. Oh, I'm pointing. It's like you don't even know what
No,
I'm
I can
pointing.
see you pointing,
You
you
know what I'm
know?
saying? Yeah. But if you look at the two peaks and in the white bit, that's his ears. The bottom, can you see it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And then and there look, I'll do it with the t-shirt.
Oh, yeah, you can see, yeah.
There his ears and there his eyes. So he's
Oh,
hiding in the
yeah, here. So here
yeah
and here.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And your t-shirt as well, amazing.
So he's hiding in
Oh,
the background. But now I've got two.
he's there.
So we may have
You've
to
got
put
two.
we may have to put two eyes somewhere else. That's Noodle.
Yeah, it needs to be added on. He can't be left out.
Yeah.
He's listening to you now, like, I hear you.
Yeah.
I'm going to hold you to that. What I would like to do now is wrap up with some quick fire questions.
Go on.
Now, these are ones that I ask everyone who comes on, so I'm really interested to hear what you've got to say because it's different for everybody. So the first one is, do you have any rituals that you do daily or any daily practices or habits or anything like that?
I generally, and pretty much for goodness knows how many, I always start off with hydration, and I always start off with some warm tea, and the tea can be 3 days old. It could be like some with leaves. It's just very, very weak, and I generally always start off with that. And I suppose that's probably the start of the ritual, every day, every day. The breath work and the training. I wouldn't really call those sort of like rituals as such, but I pretty much do breath work every day. Pretty much do training every day, in one form or another. But I think that the most sort of like ritualized thing that I do is that I drink warm tea. Like if it's like warm green tea, I put a bag or put leaves in, and I keep topping up with water, so it's still there 3 days later. Oh, yeah.
For me, that's like, oh.
Yeah, no.
But for you, it's like comforting, nourishing.
Yeah, I mean, I just like to sort of like hydrate really, really well in the morning. So I
Do you
drink a
drink
lot of.
coffee?
Yeah, I do coffee probably about an hour, couple of hours after that. I never have. I say never. Yeah, I don't have coffee as for first thing, but I love coffee.
Yeah. We're great coffee connoisseurs in our house. We've got
Yeah,
like a proper bean to cup coffee
yeah,
machine and
yeah.
okay. Describe what wellness means to you.
Contentment. I think ultimately, you have to be contented with yourself. Happy within yourself, and if you're happy within yourself, it then doesn't matter what you look like. How are you fat, thin, in between, good skin, bad skin? It doesn't. None of that has any sort of like impact. If you're happy within yourself and you have that contentment, that it's like, yeah, I'm living really well. I'm content. Then that to me is wellness. People will sort of like disagree. Yeah, but what are your markers? What's your cholesterol? What's this? What's that? What's this? And what have you? It means jack shit. If you're happy, you're happy. So that to me is happy, and contented. That to me is wellness. And some people say, yeah, but that's happiness and not wellness. Well, if you feel good like that, then to me you're well.
I love that. I think happiness is important, and in this day and age, it's something that a lot of people are fighting so hard to get, but really struggle with.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think ultimately people are chasing wellness and happiness as as the same thing, and sometimes hoping that if I eat steak every day and I have that, then I'm going to be well, healthy, and I'll be happy. And and to a degree, I mean, I agree with that. If you're feeling, if you're healthy and you can do things better, you just feel stronger. You feel, let's say, for people who are less healthy, and then all of a sudden they can, I can walk, I can do things, and what have you. Then you will be. Then happiness it will come as a consequence of that. But happiness is more than just that. Happiness is a much sort of deeper concept than just as a consequence, because I'm eating well, and I'm training, and once you start adding things, like let's call it mindset training, and then you start, and then all of a sudden, then that happiness becomes, and some people can get that happiness without they can eat crap, they can
Yeah.
smoke, they can do, and you ask them, and okay, but, well, I don't believe you. But if someone is truly happy and that there's they're smoking 20 a day or vaping, perhaps not vaping, but if they're smoking and what have you, but and they're happy, on their deathbed, then that to me is almost like well. So I think that's all we all want to be. We all want to be happy in our skin, and if we're happy in our skin, then that to me is true wellness.
Is there a message or any words of advice or anything you would like to sort of leave as a finishing comment to our listeners?
Just probably probably the most important thing that I sort of like, is, one day at a time. I mean, it's become like, it's become, a cliche to a degree, but to fully understand that, and to really understand the depths and the layers of the meaning behind that, and within that, you know, living for now, which gets back to what I say, it's one day at a time. So if you're following anything, you're starting today on a new diet regime, breathing, reading, cooking, whatever it is, you only have to do it for now. And if you can live like that, then that's it's not okay. I'll do it tomorrow, one day at a time. No, fuck that. This now is the only point in life that you have any control over. Everything else is just is as I see it, is an illusion. We live in like the illusion of the future. Oh, things would be better next week. Things were shit. Blah blah blah. It's like, doesn't matter. That person pissed me off 3 weeks ago. It's like, yeah, but it's today. So I know. I mean, like, that person is still pissing me off for like 40 years later. I think of something that happened when I was thinking, like, what a wanker. It's sort of like the only thing we can control is now one day at a time. And if you're going through, let's say, what I would call a more severe challenge, whether that's giving up alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, changing your lifestyle because the lifestyle you've been leading is shit, but that's through eating and everything, one day at a time. That's it. Not for the rest of your life, just for today, and that's it. So that's what I would say.
That's really beautiful, that whole ethos, because it can get so overwhelming to think of, oh, the future, like, how am I going to sustain this for like 40 years? But just taking it one day at a time, it's very simple. I really like it so much. Where can our listeners connect with you?
I'm only on Instagram, Mason Survival. And
I'll be sure to link that.
Mason's Meats has got its own, but Mason Survival is me.
It's you. Brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on today. Thank you
You're
for
very
your
welcome.
time and everything that you've shared. And for all our listeners, I'll be sure to link everything in the show notes down below, and make sure that you all tune in next week for the next episode.